Hi folks, Happy New Year to you all. I hope you're doing very well and that you've had a lovely break over the holidays. Maybe you're back at work, maybe you're not quite yet. I don't go back until Monday, so I'm enjoying the last 2 or 3 days of freedom before my nose is back on the grindstone. So what have I been reading since the last time we spoke on one of these, which was on the 20th of December, I think, before Christmas? The thing is, I recently did a recap of December's reading, which does include 2 or 3 books that I've read since then. So rather than repeat myself here, let me point you to that video if you haven't already watched it. I'll leave a bookmark thingy in this video. In general, actually, regular viewers may experience some deja vu in the monthly recap, since it inevitably covers some of the same ground as the individual weekly updates, albeit with the addition of the ranking and ultimately the book of the month. Anyway, what can I tell you? I have read some of the best of Cordwainer Smith. I didn't talk about this on the recap video because I didn't finish it, and I don't feel compelled in the same way to finish a short story collection or anthology in the same way that I do a novel. So I tend to read several and then mark it and then put it down until another time. This is the first time that I've read any of Cordwainer Smith's work, and my overall impression has been a super positive one, actually. I read 6 of the stories in here, and there are a couple that stood out that I'll just mention briefly. The first one is called Scanners Live in Vain, which I think I'm right in saying was Cordwainer Smith's first published short story, and it's the first set in the instrumentality of mankind timeline, which is handily sketched out at the beginning. Let me find it. At the beginning of this, we see that. So somebody's placed, I don't know if it's Cordwainer Smith or the editor, but have placed approximately where in this timeline each of these short stories appears, which is very handy. So in Scanners Live in Vain, there's something called the Great Pain of Space, which prevents conscious humans from travelling interstellar. There's something about the process drives people insane, so they have to be unconscious. But, someone's got to fly the starship. So there are something called Habermans, which are convicted criminals who've had all of their senses severed, except for sight. But they have to be controlled in turn and supervised by volunteers who are known as scanners, who've had the same procedure, but they are lauded for doing it voluntarily. I liked the kind of chewy language that's in these. Sometimes that trips me up, but not this time. There's lots of unusual terms. There's cranching, which seems to be some sort of drug-induced state that temporarily restores senses to the scanners so they can remember what it's like to be a normal person. Have relations with their wife and feel it, if you know what I mean. So the scanners are the elite of society, but they're under threat from a new technique that will allow unmodified humans to travel safely, pain-free through the stars, making the scanners ultimately redundant. And lots of dastardly plans ensue as a result. I really enjoyed the way that Cordwainer Smith basically gives you very little by way of exposition. You have to sort of figure out what everything means along the way. Sometimes we'll drop you a hint about what cranching means or what a Haberman is or whatever, but basically you're thrown in at the deep end and you just figure it out. Another story that I liked was The Game of Rat and Dragon, which features cats, and Cordwainer Smith seems to have a thing about cats. They appear in one form or another in a couple of the stories that I've read so far, including this one. The dragons of the piece are fast-moving space aliens that prey on passing starships, and the humans and the cats of the piece team up to defend the space lanes. The cats' reflexes are quick enough to draw a bead on the dragons with a nuclear pinlight weapon. The cats see the dragons as sort of giant rats that they're compelled to hunt. I really enjoyed the bond between the human pilots and the cats, although that was quite funny. And then I switched up to Mirrorshades, which is a cyberpunk anthology edited by Bruce Sterling. And I've only read 3 or 4 of these, and that's not counting the one that I previously read by William Gibson, The Gernsback Continuum. I ground to a halt a little bit because the stories were starting to get longer and longer, and I was impatient to get on with some novel reading. I feel like short stories ought to be short and something that you can get done in 10 or 15 minutes. I don't always like it. I don't always object, but I don't always like it when a short story gets delusions of being a novella and kind of just outstays its welcome a little bit. I just feel like that's a bit too much hard work for a short story. But nonetheless, I did read 3 or 4 of these. My favourite of those that I did read was something called 400 Boys, which was absolutely nuts. It's by, who's it by? Mark somebody. It's Mark Laidlaw, who I'd never heard of before. And apparently he is completely uncompromising in his style. He's out there, contrasting even with the already quite out there cyberpunk crew that write these stories. 400 Boys then is part post-apocalypse, which isn't that easy to say actually, part street gangs, part Godzilla, part Pacific Rim and part cyberpunk. And most of the time I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I really enjoyed the ride, and I enjoyed the kind of vision and the world building, such as it was, that were in the story. That was the standout for me so far in Mirrorshades. As I say, I haven't read very many, maybe a quarter of the way through the book. In both cases, I've marked my place, so I know where I am, so I will pick them up at some point in the future. Some of my reluctance to read on was probably due to this book burning a hole in my TBR pile, and I really wanted to get to it. So this is Ashes of Man, which is book 5, is it? Yeah, book 5 of the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruocchio. And regular viewers will know that I have had an absolute ball with this series. I really enjoyed it. As I've said many times, it's not high art, it's not literary science fiction by any means. It is epic widescreen space opera and a barrel of fun along the way. Having really enjoyed books 1 to 3, I had a slightly less good time with book 4. My expectations were lowered a little bit after that. However, whilst the opening 200 pages of this book, Ashes of Man, were all set up, they just didn't seem as slow as the first half of Kingdoms of Death, which is book 4. And even if they were slow, the final 300 pages of Ashes of Man were all crash bang action. And oh my God, Ruocchio is not fucking about with his protagonist, who continues to, let's just say, go through some things in these books. At the beginning of this book, Hadrian Marlowe, the main character, is several hundred years old in terms of time that he's spent awake, and over 1,000 years have passed since he was born, the difference between the two having been spent in fugue, in hypersleep, on their long journeys between the stars in the Empire. For nearly all of his 400 years, he's served the Empire in the fight against the Cielcin, the aliens of the peace. And Marlowe's early dreams of making peace with them have been repeatedly rendered completely hopeless as the books have progressed. And the carnage at the end of book 4 has to be explained to the Legion intelligence and ultimately to the Inquisitors of the Chantry. Someone must take the fall for the losses incurred, although none feel them more deeply than Marlowe himself. The Cielcin are now united behind one leader, the King Prophet, the Black Emperor, and continue to rampage through the worlds of the Solan Empire, killing and eating their way through planet after planet. There are new threats, new alliances and new dangers in Ashes of Man. The entire series is big, bold, epic, and very happy being so. Is it a little bit derivative? Yes, it borrows heavily, but I would say not obtrusively so, from earlier books. But that is the fate, is it not, of old books, to become grist to the mill of creativity. I am a huge fan of these books. I've enjoyed them all, some more than others, and now I'm trying to decide whether I let book 6 trample all over my TBR plans for January, or whether I'm patient and wait until book 7 arrives at the end of 2025 and then blitz the final 2 books in the series in one hit. I don't know, I'm torn. So if you like your space opera widescreen and epic, or if you like your science fiction leavened with some fancy elements, then I heartily recommend Sun Eater in all of its Technicolor glory. Briefly then, channel stuff. Subscriptions are at 4,042, which is up 138 since the last one of these on the 20th of December. And you'll note that we've breached the 4,000 mark, which I'd hoped we would just about do by the end of 2024, and we just about got there with a bit of time to spare. But anyway, if you were one of those 138, or if you've just stumbled across my channel for the first time today, then a huge welcome to you all. My name's John, and I focus on collecting, reading, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. The comment of the week this week was somebody called Chevalier Delise, who took the time to thank me for the content on the channel. He really appreciates it, which is always nice to hear, and then goes into recommendation mode, leaving a ton of great book recommendations to think about. I do love a good book recommendation, and it was great to get a bunch in one comment. You can pause the screen here whilst I'm showing the comment, and you can have a scan yourself. Thank you to Chevalier for taking the time to leave a comment, and thank you to all of you who do the same. I do really appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel in the last week. On Sunday, there was my usual monthly video choosing my TBR for the following month. So in this case for January 2025. And as usual, I relied upon the bingo balls of fate and the decision dice of destiny to pick the shelves and then the books respectively that I'm going to read during January. I'm really excited by the books that fate has chosen for me to read this month, and I hope you'll enjoy me waffling on about them too. On Wednesday, there was the another monthly video, the recap of the previous month's reading, so the December recap, in which I looked at every book that I read during the month. I tier rank them and then ultimately declare a book of the month. And if you haven't watched either of those, then I commend them to you. I think they're worth your time. On the book buying front, it won't massively surprise you to know that there's been something of an influx. Last time we spoke, there were 6 books on the to be hauled pile, but as we sit here now, that has reached 30. Some were Christmas gifts, some arrived in the post over the last couple of weeks, and some I found in the wild. And right after recording this video, I'm going to record a book haul to clear the decks. Let's take a quick look ahead. On Sunday, there will be the long-promised hard science fiction video. I feel like I've been talking about doing that for ages. It's finally come to fruition. I've finished it. I've edited it. It is up. It will be there on Sunday. And on Tuesday, there will be the final, I think, anyway, look at the results from the inaugural channel survey of the best science fiction books. And this time, we're looking at the books from the bottom of the pile, the books that scored just 1 point, meaning that one person voted for that book as their 10th best science fiction book ever. And there were about 50 in that category. So I've been mining that 50 for book gold, the hidden gems, if you like, from the survey results. And we'll be taking a look at 15 of those books in that video. A little bit longer range, there'll be that book haul video that will come the week after next. And I have in mind to do a winter themed video. It's got cold here in the UK finally. And there's even a threat of snow, which isn't unusual in some parts of the UK, but down south it is pretty unusual. So the time seems right to do a winter themed video. I have the books picked out. I just need to think about what I'm going to say and record it, etc. So that might appear in a couple of weeks' time. And I still have it in mind to do that mega video on space opera, the 100 years of space opera video. I need to dust that idea off and get to work on it. I haven't really done anything there apart from start to sketch out some of the books that I might like to look at. Lastly, then, what will I be reading in the coming week? I'm about a third of the way through Other Days, Other Eyes by Bob Shaw, so I should finish that in fairly short order. It's a slender book, 150 pages. I've only read a couple of Bob Shaw books, but I've liked them both, and I am enjoying this one as well, so more on that next week. And then on audiobook, I'm about 25% into something called Those Left Behind by Nick Scrimgeour, who's a Scottish author. I'm not 100% sure if these were traditionally published or self-published or whatever, but I managed to get hold of, via the author actually, audiobooks for the whole trilogy, of which this is the first. And so far, I'm enjoying it. I don't think it's going to blow my socks off or anything, but I'm intrigued enough, certainly to finish the first book, and probably I'll proceed on to the others as well. They're not thick books. It's 5 or 6 hours listening on audiobook per book. And my running is picking up again after a little bit of a rest over the holidays, so I shall get plenty of opportunity to listen to those things. So I should certainly finish that one. Will I finish that one this coming week? I will probably finish that book in the coming week. We'll see. Next, in physical book form, will be one I'm really looking forward to. I really hope that this is going to work for me. I'll be devastated if it's a massive disappointment. I'm really looking forward to it. It's The Promise of the Child by Tom Toner, and this is the first book in the so-called Amaranthine trilogy. And I think this, what I'm hoping for is that this book, it blows my mind, and that I am a disciple. I become a disciple of Tom Toner's, and a herald for his books. So we'll have to just wait and see what I think of it. I'm hopeful. I think, judging by the vibe, I think I'm going to like it. And then if I finish that, then I will move on to Hegira by Greg Bear, which is one of his earlier books from the late 70s. It's not a thick book, but I gather it's a little bit hard going. So we'll see how I get on. If I finish both of those, and I'm not sure that I will, given that I'm back at work on Monday, then I will pick something else off the TBR pile, whichever takes my fancy. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye for now.